The blood-red sun dipped below the jagged horizon as Beau Daniels dragged himself through the dust of Rawhide, Wyoming territory. 1875, a broken shell of a man who'd left his soul scattered across the battlefields of a war that had ended a decade ago but still raged within him. His left sleeve hung empty, pinned neatly at the shoulder, a constant reminder of what he'd lost to a Confederate cannonball at Gettysburg. The town of Rawhide had sprung up after the war, a collection of weathered buildings, saloons, and dreams either fulfilled or shattered. Beau had no dreams left. At 32, he'd survived longer than many of his fellow Union soldiers, though some days he wondered why fate had chosen to spare him while taking so many others. "You look like hell warmed over," called Tom Higgins from his post outside the general store. Tom was one of the few men in town who didn't treat Beau like a ghost. "Feel about the same," Beau replied, managing a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mail come in yet? Stagecoach is late. Probably hit trouble in the pass." Tom scratched his beard thoughtfully. "You still expectin' that package from back east?" Beau nodded. "Medical books. Dr. Miller says they might help with my..." He trailed off, not wanting to talk about the nightmares, the cold sweats, the moments when his mind traveled back to Pennsylvania and the sounds of dying men. He'd come to Wyoming hoping to outrun his demons, but they'd followed him faithfully. After drifting for years, he'd settled in Rawhide 6 months ago, taking odd jobs and keeping to himself. The townsfolk regarded him with a mixture of pity and wariness, the one-armed veteran who rarely spoke and never smiled. "You ought to come to the social on Saturday," Tom said. "Sheriff's daughter is organizing, says we need more civilization out here." He chuckled. "Might do you good to see something pretty for a change." Beau mumbled something non-committal and continued down the street toward the small cabin he rented at the edge of town. He had no interest in socials or pretty things. They belonged to a world he no longer inhabited. The sound of horses' hooves made him turn. The stagecoach was arriving, kicking up clouds of dust as it thundered down the main street. Beau stepped back, watching as it came to a halt outside the Rawhide Hotel. The driver jumped down, shouting about bandits in the pass and how they'd barely made it through. Passengers began disembarking: a portly businessman, a young couple, and finally, a woman traveling alone. She descended the steps with careful dignity, surveying Rawhide with clear, appraising eyes. Beau couldn't help but notice her. She stood straight as a pine, dressed in a practical blue traveling dress that had seen better days but still maintained a certain elegance. Her chestnut hair was pinned neatly beneath a modest hat, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was and where she belonged. She caught him staring, and instead of looking away, she nodded politely. Embarrassed, Beau touched the brim of his hat and turned to leave. "Excuse me," she called, her voice carrying over the bustle of the stage's arrival. "Could you direct me to Dr. Miller's office?" Beau hesitated, then gestured down the street. "Third building past the saloon. White door with a red cross painted on it." "Thank you, sir," she replied, gathering her carpet bag. "I'm Naomi Allen, the new nurse." The town had been talking for weeks about how Dr. Miller had written back east for a trained nurse to help with his growing practice. Rawhide was expanding, with new families arriving weekly, drawn by rumors of silver in the nearby mountains and cheap land for ranching. "Beau Daniels," he said, the words feeling rusty in his mouth. I can show you the way if you'd like." She smiled, and something stirred in Beau's chest, a feeling so long forgotten he barely recognized it. "That would be most kind, Mr. Daniels." As they walked, Naomi spoke of her journey west, her training at a Boston hospital, and her decision to seek adventure in Wyoming. Beau found himself listening, really listening, for the first time in years. "And what brings you to Rawhide, Mr. Daniels?" she asked as they neared the doctor's office. "The war," he said simply, the words hanging between them like smoke. Her eyes drifted to his empty sleeve, then back to his face. There was no pity in her gaze, only understanding. "Many roads lead from battlefields," she said. "I treated soldiers after Antietam. I know something of those roads." Before Beau could respond, the doctor's door opened, and Miller himself emerged, gray-haired, spectacled, and beaming. "Miss Allen, you've arrived, and I see you've met our Beau already." Beau stepped back, suddenly aware of the contrast between his dusty clothes and the doctor's neat appearance. "Just showing Miss Allen the way," he murmured. "Well, come in, both of you," Miller insisted. "Beau, those medical journals you ordered came on yesterday's mail coach. I've been wanting to discuss them with you." Naomi looked at Beau with new interest. "You study medicine." "Just trying to understand some things," Beau said uncomfortably. Dr. Miller clapped him on his good shoulder. "Beau here has been reading everything I can get him on the nervous system and battlefield trauma. Smart as a whip, this one." Inside the office, Miller poured coffee while Naomi removed her hat and gloves. In the lamplight, Beau could see she was older than he'd first thought, perhaps 28 or 30, with fine lines around her eyes that spoke of both laughter and sorrow. "Miss Allen has extensive experience with the kinds of troubles you've been researching," Miller said, handing Beau a thick parcel of books and journals. "Perhaps you two could compare notes sometime." "I'd be happy to discuss anything that might be helpful," Naomi offered. "The war left many wounds that can't be seen." Beau clutched the package tightly. "I should go, let you get settled. Will you be at the social on Saturday?" Naomi asked suddenly. Beau paused at the door. "I don't usually attend such things. Perhaps you could make an exception." Her eyes held his, challenging yet kind. "I'll be there, and I don't know a soul in Rawhide except Dr. Miller. And now you." Something about the way she said it, like she truly wanted his company, made Beau nod before he could think better of it. "Perhaps I could." As he walked home in the gathering darkness, Beau wondered what had possessed him to accept. Socials meant crowds, noise, expectations, all things he'd avoided since returning from the war. Yet the thought of seeing Naomi Allen again made his heart beat a little faster. That night, Beau dreamed not of battlefields but of a woman in a blue dress, standing in sunlight, beckoning him forward into a future he'd long ago stopped believing in. The Saturday social arrived with clear skies and a nervous energy that seemed to vibrate through Rawhide. Beau had spent the morning in agonized indecision, alternately committing to attend and then vowing to stay away. By late afternoon, he found himself standing before his cracked mirror, attempting to tame his sun-bleached hair and straighten his best shirt, one he'd worn perhaps twice in the last 3 years. The town hall had been transformed with paper lanterns and wildflowers. A trio of musicians tuned up in one corner while tables groaned under the weight of contributed dishes. Beau lingered at the edges, nodding to acquaintances but avoiding conversation. He was about to leave when Naomi arrived. She wore a dress of soft green that complemented her eyes, her hair arranged in a simple but elegant style. She carried a covered dish and smiled as she greeted people, already seeming more at home than Beau had ever felt. She spotted him almost immediately, making her way through the gathering crowd with determined grace. "Mr. Daniels, you came." "I said I might," he replied, suddenly aware of his awkward posture. "Yes, you did," she smiled, something warm and genuine that reached her eyes. "Would you help me find a place for my apple cobbler? Dr. Miller says it's a Wyoming tradition." Before he could refuse, she'd handed him the dish and was leading him toward the food tables. People looked at them curiously, the standoffish veteran and the new nurse, walking together. "Everyone's staring," Beau muttered. "Let them," Naomi said calmly. "I've found people will talk regardless of what we do. Might as well give them something worth discussing." Her pragmatism surprised a laugh out of him, a rusty, unfamiliar sound. She looked pleased, as if she'd accomplished something significant. As the evening progressed, Beau found himself pulled into conversations he would normally have avoided. Naomi had a talent for drawing people out, asking questions that made even the most taciturn rancher open up. She included Beau naturally, referring to his insights or experiences, creating space for him to speak without putting him on the spot. When the dancing began, Beau stiffened. This was where he'd make his escape, but Naomi touched his arm gently. "Would you walk me outside for some air? It's getting rather warm in here." The night air was cool and sweet with the scent of sage. They strolled to a bench beneath a cottonwood tree where the music drifted out to them in muted strains. "You're very kind," Beau said finally, "but you don't need to spend your evening with me. There are plenty of eligible men in there who'd be happy for your company." "I'm enjoying the company I have," Naomi replied. After a moment she added, "I recognize the look in your eyes, Mr. Daniels. I've seen it too often not to know it." "And what look is that?" he asked, though part of him dreaded her answer. "The look of someone who's lost their way home. Her voice was gentle but firm. Who can't find their way back to themselves? Beau felt exposed, as if she'd peeled back his skin to reveal the broken pieces underneath. "There's no way back," he said roughly. "Not from where I've been." "Perhaps not back," she conceded, "but forward. That path is always open if we choose to see it." They sat in silence for a long moment, watching stars appear in the deepening night. "When I was a little girl," Naomi said, "my father took me fishing on a lake near our home in Vermont. I fell and couldn't swim a stroke. The water closed over my head and I was certain I would die. But then my father's hand closed around my wrist and pulled me up into the air and light." She turned to face him. "For many people, Mr. Daniels, war is like that lake. Some drown in it. Others are pulled out but never forget the feeling of the water filling their lungs. They live the rest of their lives afraid of drowning again. And you think I'm afraid?" There was an edge to his voice. "I think you're brave," she countered. "You survived, you're still here, still searching for understanding. That takes courage few possess." Inside the hall, the music changed to a slower tune. Couples moved together on the dance floor, visible through the open doors. "I can't dance," Beau said suddenly. "Not anymore." Naomi stood, straightening her skirts. "Neither can I. I have 2 left feet, according to my brothers, but we could try, couldn't we?" "Just here under the stars, where no one's watching," she held out her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Beau took it with his right. "I don't know how to lead with one arm." "Then I'll lead," she said simply, placing his hand at her waist and taking his phantom left arm as if it were still there. "We'll find our way together." And so they danced, awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence, a slow, swaying movement that barely qualified as dancing but felt more real than anything Beau had experienced in years. When the music ended, they remained still, looking at each other in the silver moonlight. Something was changing between them, something neither could yet name but both could feel. "Thank you for the dance, Mr. Daniels," Naomi said softly. "Beau," he corrected. "I think I'd like it if you called me Beau." "Beau," she repeated, smiling, "and I'm Naomi, not Miss Allen." "Naomi," he said, testing the name. It felt right on his tongue, like a word he'd been trying to remember for years. As they walked back to the social, Beau knew something had shifted. The path forward was still unclear, but for the first time in a very long time, he wanted to see where it might lead. The weeks that followed brought changes to Beau's carefully isolated existence. Rawhide was growing, with new construction stretching the town's boundaries and fresh faces appearing daily. The railroad was rumored to be coming within the year, bringing with it prosperity and progress. Beau found himself drawn into the life of the community in ways he'd previously avoided. It began with Naomi asking for his help at the clinic, moving supplies, building shelves, eventually assisting with patients when an extra pair of hands was needed. "You have a natural way with the children, doctor," Miller observed one afternoon after Beau had calmed a terrified boy during a painful procedure. "They trust you." Beau had never considered this. Children usually stared at his missing arm or avoided him altogether. But here in the clinic, his quiet manner and steady presence seemed to reassure them. "I talk to them like people," he said with a shrug, "not like they're stupid or breakable." Naomi smiled from where she was organizing bandages. "That's precisely why they respond to you. Children know when they're being respected." Working at the clinic gave Beau purpose. The medical books he'd ordered became dog-eared as he studied in the evenings, discussing cases and treatments with Miller and Naomi. His nightmares didn't disappear, but they came less frequently. When they did come, he began writing down what he remembered, not just the images of horror, but the feelings, the smells, the sounds. One evening in late September, as gold and crimson leaves drifted down from the cottonwoods, Naomi found him sitting on the clinic porch, scribbling in a battered notebook. "May I join you?" she asked. Beau nodded, closing the notebook, but not before she glimpsed the tight, cramped writing that filled its pages. "Your journal?" she asked, settling beside him on the step. "Not exactly." He hesitated, then added, "Dr. Miller suggested I write down the nightmares. Said it might help to get them out of my head. Does it? Sometimes." He looked out at the street, where workers were raising the frame of a new building across from the general store. "It feels like drawing poison from a wound." Naomi was silent for a moment. "In Boston, I worked with a doctor who believed that wounds of the mind need treatment just as wounds of the body do. He taught that speaking or writing about traumatic experiences could help the mind process them. Miller mentioned something similar. Beau tapped the notebook against his knee. I thought it was nonsense at first, but there's something to it. Would you read some to me? Naomi asked hesitantly. Only if you want to, of course. Beau stared at her, surprised. They're not pleasant reading. I don't imagine they would be, she said steadily. But I'd like to understand if you're willing to share. No one had ever asked to see his writings before. The thought of Naomi reading his raw, unfiltered memories made him deeply uncomfortable. And yet, a part of him wanted her to know to see the darkness he carried and not turn away. Not today, he said finally, but maybe someday. She nodded, accepting his answer without pressing. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and stars appeared overhead. I received a letter from my brother today, Naomi said eventually. He's a professor at Yale now. Wants me to return east, says a woman of my education is wasted in the wilderness. She smiled faintly. He's never understood why I left. And why did you? Beau asked, realizing he'd never questioned her decision to come west. After the war, after all the suffering I'd seen, Boston felt confined. Everyone there was trying so hard to forget, to go back to how things were before, but I couldn't forget, and I didn't want to. Her fingers twisted in her lap. I needed space to breathe, to find purpose in something new, and have you found purpose? She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the first evening stars. Yes, I believe I have. The way she said it, looking directly at him, made Beau's heart quicken. They'd grown close over the weeks, but neither had spoken of feelings beyond friendship. He wasn't sure he had anything to offer a woman like Naomi, educated, capable, whole in ways he wasn't. Sheriff's gathering a posse, called a voice from the street, interrupting the moment. They looked up to see Deputy Lewis riding past. Hendrick's gang hit the Wells station. Killed the station master. Beau felt a familiar tension grip his shoulders. The Hendricks brothers had been terrorizing the territory for months, robbing stage coaches, raiding isolated ranches, and now, apparently, graduating to murder. Will you ride with them? Naomi asked quietly. Beau shook his head. What use would I be? He gestured to his missing arm. Can't shoot straight anymore, can't rope, can't fight. Something flashed in her eyes, not pity, but a fierce belief that startled him. You underestimate yourself, Beau Daniels. Before he could respond, Doctor. Miller emerged from the clinic, face grim. Just heard about Wells Station. We'd better prepare for wounded. Sheriff says they're bringing the station master's boy to town alive but badly hurt. The next hours passed in a flurry of activity as they readied the clinic. Just after midnight, riders arrived carrying a small form wrapped in blankets. Jacob Wells was 10 years old and had hidden in a storage cellar while his father was murdered above. A bullet had grazed his head and he was unconscious, his breathing shallow. Doctor. Miller worked through the night with Naomi assisting. Beau stayed, fetching supplies, holding lamps, doing whatever was needed. By dawn, the boy was stable but still unconscious. Brain injuries are unpredictable, Miller said, washing blood from his hands. All we can do now is wait and pray. I'll sit with him, Beau offered. You two should rest. Naomi looked ready to protest, but Miller nodded gratefully. Wake us if there's any change. Alone with the boy, Beau settled into a chair beside the bed. Jacob's face was pale against the bandages, his breathing steady but shallow. Beau knew what it was to wake in pain, disoriented, memories of violence fresh in the mind. You're not alone, he said quietly, though he wasn't sure Jacob could hear. I know it feels like you are, but you're not. Throughout the day, Beau talked to the unconscious child, telling him about Rawhide, about the mountains visible from the clinic window, about the wild horses that sometimes came down to the creek at dawn. He read from one of Miller's medical texts, then switched to a dog-eared copy of The Last of the Mohicans he found on a shelf. As evening approached, Jacob's breathing changed. His eyelids fluttered and he made a soft sound of distress. Easy now, Beau said, leaning forward. You're safe, Jacob. You're at the doctor's in Rawhide. The boy's eyes opened unfocused at first, then sharpening with fear. Pa, he whispered. Beau took his small hand. I'm sorry, son, your pa didn't make it. Jacob's face crumpled, tears leaking from the corners of his eyes. The men with guns, they're gone now, Beau assured him, though he knew the Hendricks gang was still at large. The sheriff's looking for them, you're safe here. I couldn't help Pa, Jacob sobbed. I was scared, I hid. The words hit Beau like a physical blow. How many times had he condemned himself for surviving when others didn't? For the choices he'd made in moments of fear and chaos. You did exactly right, he said firmly. Your pa would be proud that you stayed safe. That was what he wanted most. Jacob turned his face toward the wall. Don't matter now, got nobody left. Beau knew the boy had no other family. His mother had died of fever 2 years earlier. You've got people who care about you, he said. Dr. Miller, Miss Allen, me, and there are good folks in town who'll help. Not the same, Jacob whispered, his voice small and broken. No, Beau agreed. It's not the same, nothing ever is after you lose someone you love, but that doesn't mean you're alone. He hesitated, then continued. I lost my arm in the war, lost friends too. For a long time I thought I'd never be whole again, that I'd never find my place in the world. Jacob turned back to look at him, eyes red-rimmed but curious. What changed? I came here, Beau said simply. Found people who saw me, not just what I was missing. It doesn't erase what happened. But it helps, makes room for something new. When Naomi came to check on them an hour later, she found Beau reading aloud while Jacob listened, his small hand still clasped in Beau's larger one. Something in her expression made Beau pause. What is it? He asked. She shook her head, blinking rapidly. Nothing, it's just good to see you both awake. That night, after Jacob had been settled with a sleeping draft and Miller had gone home to rest, Naomi found Beau on the clinic porch again. You were wonderful with him today, she said, sitting beside him. Beau shrugged uncomfortably. Just talk to him. You gave him hope, she corrected, and understanding, those are precious gifts. They sat in companionable silence, watching as lamps were lit in windows across town. The evening was cool, promising winter in the mountain air. The sheriff's posse returned, Naomi said eventually. They lost the Hendricks gang in the hills, but they'll try again tomorrow. Beau nodded, unsurprised. The territory was vast, with countless places for outlaws to hide. What will happen to Jacob? For now, he'll stay here until he's stronger. After that, she sighed. There's talk of sending him to an orphanage in Cheyenne, an orphanage. The word tasted bitter. Beau had known boys who grew up in such places, institutional, cold, designed to process children rather than nurture them. Unless someone here is willing to take him in, Naomi said, watching Beau's profile in the fading light. He needs a family, a mother and father. Perhaps he just needs people who care about him. She placed her hand over his on the porch step. People who understand loss and how to live with it. Beau looked at their hands, her small but strong, with neat, short nails and a small scar across the knuckles. A healer's hands. His own was rough, calloused, marked by years of hard work and harder living. I wouldn't know how to raise a boy, he said, voicing the thought that had been forming since he sat with Jacob. I think you'd learn, as all parents do. Her fingers tightened on his, and you wouldn't be alone. The implication hung in the air between them. Beau looked up at her face, searching for confirmation of what he thought she meant. Naomi, he began, but was cut off by shouting from the street. Doctor, need the doctor, called a frantic voice. They both jumped up as riders thundered toward the clinic. In the lead was Sheriff Morgan, supporting a slumped figure on his horse. Ambush, the sheriff gasped as they helped lower the wounded man. Hendricks was waiting for us. The injured man was Deputy Lewis, blood soaking his shirt from a bullet wound in his chest. As they carried him inside, Beau recognized the stillness of his face, the shallow, gurgling breaths. He'd seen too many men die not to know the signs. Dr. Miller arrived moments later, summoned from his home by a neighbor. Despite their efforts, Lewis died on the operating table less than an hour later, his lungs filling with blood faster than they could drain them. Damn those Hendricks brothers to hell, Miller muttered, covering Lewis's face with a sheet. Third good man they've killed this year. Sheriff Morgan, his own arm bandaged where a bullet had grazed him, looked grim. They knew the pass we'd be using. Someone's feeding them information. You think there's a spy in Rawhide? Naomi asked, washing blood from her hands. Don't know what to think anymore, the sheriff admitted. But I'm running out of deputies willing to ride after them. Later, as they cleaned the operating room in exhausted silence, Beau made a decision. I want to go with the next posse. Naomi stopped, a bloody rag in her hand. Beau, you said yourself, I know what I said, he interrupted. But I can still ride, still track, and I know those mountains better than most. It was true his months of solitary wandering before settling in Rawhide had given him an intimate knowledge of the surrounding wilderness. "It's too dangerous," she protested. For Lewis, it was too dangerous. For Jacob's father, Beau set down the basin he was holding. "I can't sit by and do nothing anymore, Naomi, not when I might be able to help." She studied his face, seeing the determination there. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said finally. "Promise me you'll come back." The intensity in her voice made his heart constrict. "I promise," he said, and meant it. The next morning, Beau rode out with Sheriff Morgan and 4 other men, a mixed group of ranchers, former soldiers, and townspeople determined to end the Hendricks threat. To his surprise, Beau found his military experience useful as Morgan relied on him to help plan their approach. "These hills are a maze," the sheriff said as they made camp the first night. "Hendricks knows them well." "So do I," Beau replied, sketching a rough map in the dirt. "There's an old mining camp here, abandoned years ago. Good place for an outlaw hideout, water source, shelter, multiple escape routes." Morgan studied the map, impressed. "How'd you come to know this territory so well, Daniels?" Beau shrugged. "Spent a lot of time wandering after the war. Needed the solitude." One of the other men, a blacksmith named Harker, spat into the fire. "Didn't know one-armed men made good trackers." There was a tense silence. Beau met Harker's challenging gaze steadily. "I track with my eyes and my mind, not my arms." "But if you've got doubts, you're welcome to head back to town." Sheriff Morgan intervened. "Daniels is here at my invitation, Harker. I value his knowledge." Harker muttered something under his breath but didn't press the issue. As they settled in for the night, Beau took first watch, staring into the darkness beyond their small fire. He thought of Naomi, of Jacob, of the life waiting for him in Rawhide. For the first time in years, he had someone to return to. The next day brought them into increasingly rough country, steep ravines, dense pine forests, rocky outcrops that provided perfect ambush positions. Beau's senses were on high alert, scanning constantly for signs of human passage. By mid-afternoon, they found fresh hoofprints crossing a creek bed. 4, maybe 5 riders, Beau said, examining the tracks. Heavy horses moving fast. "Hendricks has 6 men with him," Morgan said. "Could be them." They followed the trail cautiously, weapons ready. The sun was low when Beau raised his hand for a halt. "Smoke," he whispered, pointing toward a stand of trees ahead. "And horses." Through binoculars, Morgan confirmed it was the Hendricks camp. 7 men were visible, gathered around a fire in a small clearing, apparently unconcerned about pursuit. "We're outnumbered," whispered Harker. "Should go back for more men, and lose them again." Morgan shook his head. "They'll be gone by morning. We need to take them now while we have surprise on our side." They crafted a hasty plan surrounding the camp and closing in from all directions at Morgan's signal. Beau positioned himself on a ridge overlooking the clearing, rifle ready. He wasn't the marksman he'd once been, but at this range, he could still hit what he aimed at. The attack began just as dusk was falling. Morgan's first shot took down one of the gang members immediately. The others scrambled for weapons and cover as bullets flew from multiple directions. In the chaos, Beau spotted Hendricks himself, a tall man with a distinctive red beard, making for the horses. He sighted carefully and fired. Hendricks staggered but kept moving, returning fire in Beau's direction. Beau felt something hot graze his temple as he ducked behind a boulder. The gunfight was brief but intense. When it ended, 3 of the Hendricks gang lay dead, 2 were wounded and captured, and 2, including Ellie, had escaped into the gathering darkness. "You're bleeding, Daniels," Morgan said as they secured the prisoners. Beau touched his temple, his fingers coming away red. "Just a graze." One of the captured men, nursing a bullet wound in his shoulder, glared up at them. "You'll never catch Ellie now. He knows every cave and hollow in these mountains." "That right," Morgan squatted beside the man. "Well, we caught you easy enough, and we'll find him too." "Don't matter if you do," the outlaw sneered. "He's got friends in high places, friends in Rawhide." Morgan's expression hardened. "What friends, wouldn't you like to know?" The man spat at Morgan's feet. "Figure it out yourself." They made camp for the night, the mood tense with the knowledge that 2 armed and dangerous men were still at large nearby. Beau offered to take first watch again, his mind troubled by the outlaw's words. A friend in Rawhide, someone passing information. His thoughts turned to Naomi, to Jacob, to the vulnerability of those waiting back in town. If Hendricks had an accomplice there, no one was truly safe. The prisoners refused to say more, and by morning, Morgan decided to split their party. He and 2 men would take the captives back to Rawhide, while Beau and the others would continue tracking Illy Hendricks and his remaining companion. "Be careful," Morgan warned as they parted ways. "Wounded animals are the most dangerous." For 2 days, they followed a faint trail through increasingly difficult terrain. Hendricks was heading deeper into the mountains, toward the high country where winter had already left snow on the peaks. "He's hoping to lose us in the passes," Beau explained as they made camp on the second night. "If we get caught in an early storm up there, we'll be in trouble." Harker, who had grown more respectful of Beau's skills, nodded grimly. "So what's your plan?" "There's an old trapper's cabin near the eastern pass," Beau said, warming his hands by the fire. "If I were Hendricks, that's where I'd head. It's stocked with supplies hidden from the main trail." "How do you know about it?" asked the third man. "Jensen, a quiet rancher who rarely spoke, stayed there once," Beau replied. "2 winters ago got caught in a blizzard. Old man who owned it was hospitable. Died last spring, according to Miller." They set out at first light, pushing their horses as hard as they dared on the treacherous mountain trails. By mid-afternoon, they were approaching the cabin, moving cautiously through dense pine forest. "Smoke," Harker whispered, pointing. Beau nodded. A thin wisp rose from the cabin's stone chimney, barely visible against the gray sky. They dismounted, tethering their horses out of sight, and approached on foot. The cabin sat in a small clearing, seemingly peaceful. 2 horses were tethered outside, confirming their suspicions. Beau signaled for the others to circle around, planning to approach from multiple directions. He had nearly reached his position when a twig snapped behind him. Beau whirled, reaching for his pistol, but it was too late. Illy Hendricks stood 10 feet away, rifle leveled at Beau's chest. Well, well," the outlaw drawled. "Look what we caught. A 1-armed tracker." His red beard was matted with blood from the wound Beau had inflicted days earlier, but his hands were steady on the rifle. "Your gang's finished, Hendricks," Beau said calmly, trying to buy time for the others to realize something was wrong. "Morgan has your men, the law's closing in." Hendricks laughed an ugly, rasping sound. "Law? There's no law out here but this." He patted his rifle. "And I've got friends looking out for my interests in Rawhide. Important friends." "Who?" Beau asked, his mind racing. "Who's your man in Rawhide? Curious, ain't you?" Hendricks took a step closer. "Maybe I'll tell you before I put a bullet in your head." A shot rang out, startling them both. Hendricks half turned, and Beau seized the opportunity, lunging forward and tackling the outlaw. They crashed to the ground, the rifle discharging harmlessly into the air. Beau's world narrowed to the desperate struggle. 1-armed or not, years of hard living had made him strong, and desperation lent him added power. He slammed his fist into Hendricks's wounded side, earning a howl of pain. The outlaw was strong too, though, and fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal. He managed to draw a knife, slashing wildly. Beau felt a burning pain across his ribs but kept fighting, knocking the knife away and driving his knee into Hendricks's stomach. More shots sounded nearby, Harker and Jensen engaging the other outlaw, he presumed. Hendricks used the distraction to throw Beau off, scrambling for his dropped rifle. Beau lunged again, grabbing the rifle with his one hand just as Hendricks reached it. They wrestled for control, rolling dangerously close to the edge of a steep ravine that dropped away beside the clearing. "You're dead, cripple," Hendricks snarled, his face inches from Beau's. Something cold and hard settled in Beau's chest, not fear but resolve. "Not today," he replied, and with a final surge of strength, twisted the rifle and drove the stock into Hendricks's wounded side. The outlaw screamed, his grip loosening just enough. Beau wrenched the rifle away and brought it down hard against Hendricks's head. The outlaw went limp, blood trickling from his temple. Breathing hard, Beau checked to make sure Hendricks was still alive, then bound his hands with a leather thong from his belt. Only then did he become aware of the silence from the direction of the cabin. "Harker, Jensen," he called, struggling to his feet. "Here," came Jensen's voice, strained with pain. "Harker's down." Beau found them near the cabin door. Harker lay motionless, a bullet hole in his chest. Jensen was sitting against the cabin wall, clutching his bleeding leg. "Got the other one," Jensen said grimly, nodding toward a body sprawled in the cabin doorway. But not before he got Harker. Got me too, but I'll live. Beau checked Harker, confirming what he already knew: the blacksmith was dead, his eyes staring sightlessly at the darkening sky. He closed them gently, feeling the familiar weight of loss. "We need to get you and Hendricks back to town," he told Jensen, tearing strips from his shirt to bind the rancher's wound. "Can you ride?" Jensen nodded tightly. "Hurts like hell, but I can stay on a horse." It was a grim journey back to Rawhide. They traveled slowly, Hendricks bound and slung over his horse like a sack of grain, Jensen gritting his teeth against the pain of his wound. Beau led the way, alert for any sign of trouble. His own injuries: a knife wound across his ribs and the bullet graze on his temple, painful but not debilitating. On the third day, as they descended from the mountains, Beau spotted riders approaching a search party from Rawhide, led by Sheriff Morgan himself. "Thought you boys might need some help," Morgan called as they met on the trail. His eyes widened at the sight of Hendricks, still unconscious but alive. "Well done, Daniels, you got him." "Harker's dead," Beau said flatly. "Left him buried up near the trapper's cabin. Jensen needs a doctor." Morgan nodded, dispatching 2 men to help Jensen. "And Hendricks's partner?" "Dead," Jensen confirmed. "But before we finished him, he said something about their friend in town, said it was someone close to the law." Morgan's face darkened. "I've been thinking on that. Only a few people knew which pass we were planning to use that day. One of them was my new deputy, Reeves. Took him on 6 months ago." "Reeves," Beau repeated, the name triggering a memory. "Tall fellow, wears a silver watch chain. That's him. I saw him talking to a stranger outside the saloon the day before you rode out," Beau said, the pieces falling into place. "Seemed nervous about it." Morgan cursed under his breath. "He stayed behind to guard the jail if he's Hendricks's man." They pushed hard for Rawhide, reaching town just after nightfall. As they approached the sheriff's office, they saw the door standing open, light spilling onto the boardwalk. "Something's wrong," Morgan muttered, drawing his pistol. They dismounted, approaching cautiously. Inside, they found the cells empty, the keys hanging in the lock, and Deputy Reeves nowhere to be seen. "The prisoners," Morgan growled. "He's let them go." A soft groan drew their attention to the corner of the office. Dr. Miller lay on the floor, a bloody gash on his forehead, struggling to sit up. "Miller," Beau rushed to the doctor's side, helping him to a chair. "What happened, Reeves?" Miller gasped, touching his wound gingerly. "Came to check on a prisoner. Saw him unlocking the cells. When I questioned him, he hit me with his pistol." "Where's Naomi?" Beau asked, sudden fear gripping him. "And Jacob?" "At the clinic," Miller said. "I came alone." Beau was on his feet instantly, heading for the door. "Reeves might go there next. He knows I was tracking Hendricks." Morgan nodded grimly. "Go, we'll secure Hendricks and organize a search for Reeves and the escaped prisoners." Beau ran through the darkened streets, fear lending speed to his tired legs. The clinic was on the other side of town, its windows glowing with lamplight. As he approached, he heard a raised voice from inside, angry, threatening. Drawing his pistol, Beau moved to the window, peering carefully through a gap in the curtains. Inside, he could see Naomi standing protectively in front of Jacob, her face pale but determined. Deputy Reeves paced before them, gesturing with his gun. "Doesn't matter now," Reeves was saying. "Plans changed, need to get out of the territory, and I need leverage." "Taking us won't help you," Naomi replied steadily. "The sheriff will hunt you to the ends of the earth." Reeves laughed bitterly. "Sheriff's a fool, been right under his nose for months, feeding information to Ellie, well-paying work too." "Until now," Naomi observed. "Now you're running." "Shut up," Reeves snapped. "Get some supplies together, food, medicine, we're leaving in 5 minutes." Beau eased away from the window, circling around to the back door of the clinic. He knew the layout well: the main room where Naomi and Jacob stood, a smaller examination room, and a storage area with a door that led to the alley behind. The back door was unlocked. Beau slipped inside silently, moving through the darkened storage room toward the sound of voices. Through a partially open door, he could see Reeves's back as the corrupt deputy watched Naomi gather supplies with shaking hands. Jacob saw Beau first, his eyes widening. Beau pressed a finger to his lips, and the boy gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Need to hurry," Reeves urged, gesturing with his gun. "Get the boy his coat. It's cold out." As Naomi moved toward the coat rack, deliberately positioning herself to block Reeves's view of the storage room door, Beau made his move. He crossed the space in 3 quick strides, pressing his pistol against the back of Reeves's head. "Drop the gun," he said quietly, "or I'll put a bullet in your skull right here." Reeves froze, then slowly lowered his weapon to the floor. "Daniels, didn't expect to see you alive." "Sorry to disappoint," Beau replied, kicking Reeves's gun away. "Hands behind your back." As Beau secured the deputy with a length of bandage Naomi handed him, he was aware of her eyes on him, taking in his battered appearance, the dried blood on his temple, the torn and dirty clothes. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. "Nothing serious," he assured her. "You and Jacob okay?" Jacob stepped forward, his small face set in a determined frown. "I wasn't scared this time," he declared. "Was going to hit him with the fire poker if he hurt Miss Allen." Beau felt a surge of pride for the boy's courage. "Good man, but I'm glad you didn't have to." Sheriff Morgan and his men arrived minutes later, taking Reeves into custody. The town was in an uproar as news spread about the deputy's betrayal and the capture of Ellie Hendricks. Later, after Reeves and Hendricks were securely locked in cells with trusted guards, after Jacob had been put to bed in the clinic's back room, and after Miller had stitched the knife wound on Beau's ribs, Naomi and Beau found themselves alone in the quiet clinic. "I was afraid you wouldn't come back," Naomi admitted, her hands busy with organizing bandages that didn't really need organizing. "I promised I would," Beau reminded her. He hesitated, then added, "I had something to come back for." She looked up at that, her eyes meeting his. "Did you?" "You know I did." He took a step closer, suddenly uncertain despite everything they'd been through. "Naomi, I'm not whole. The war took pieces of me I'll never get back, not just my arm." "Beau," she began, but he shook his head. "Let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. "For years, I've been half alive, walking through the world like a ghost. I thought that was all I deserved, all I could expect. And then you came to Rawhide and you really saw me. Not as a broken soldier, but as a man." Naomi moved closer, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she used. "Is that how you still see yourself? As broken?" Beau considered the question honestly. "I used to think I'd never feel whole again, that I'd always be missing something essential. And now?" Her eyes searched his face, looking for the truth. "Now I think maybe I was wrong." He reached out hesitantly, taking her hand. "These past months, working with you and Miller, helping people, even chasing down Hendricks, I felt more alive than I have since before the war." Naomi's fingers tightened around his. "You know what I see when I look at you, Beau Daniels? I see a brave, intelligent, compassionate man who has survived terrible things but hasn't let them defeat his spirit." "I'm not sure that's true," he admitted. "There were many dark years." "But you kept going," she insisted. "You kept searching for understanding, for purpose. That takes extraordinary courage." Beau looked down at their joined hands, his large and rough, her smaller but equally strong in her own way. "When I was up in those mountains, fighting with Hendricks, there was a moment when I thought I might die there, and all I could think about was getting back to you, to Jacob. We were waiting," she said simply. "We'll always be waiting." Something shifted in Beau's chest, a loosening of a knot he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten it wasn't a natural part of him. "I want to ask Jacob to stay," he said. "To live with me, but my cabin's too small and I don't know the first thing about raising a boy." "We could learn together," Naomi suggested, her voice soft but certain. If that's what you want." Beau looked at her, hardly daring to believe what she was offering. "Naomi, are you saying I'm saying I love you, Beau Daniels?" The words hung in the air between them, clear and unambiguous. "I love your strength, your gentleness, your determination to do what's right. I love the way you talk to Jacob like he matters. I love the way you look at the world like you're still trying to understand it, despite everything it's done to you." Beau felt as though the ground had shifted beneath his feet. In all his imaginings, he'd never dared to hope for this, for someone like Naomi to love someone like him. "I don't have much to offer," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Just a broken soldier trying to find his way." Naomi stepped closer still, raising her hand to his cheek. "You have everything to offer." He thought he'd never feel whole again. She said, "You already are, you just forgot." She smiled, tears gathering in her eyes. "You already are whole, Beau, you just forgot for a while." And then she was in his arms, and he was kissing her, and the last pieces of the wall he'd built around his heart crumbled away. In that moment, Beau Daniels felt truly alive for the first time in more than a decade, not despite his wounds, but with them, carrying them not as a burden but as part of the man he had become. The following weeks brought many changes to Rawhide. Illy Hendricks and Deputy Reeves were transported to Cheyenne for trial, along with the remaining gang members. The town began to breathe easier, knowing the threat that had hung over them for so long was finally gone. For Beau, Naomi, and Jacob, change came in more personal forms. After much discussion, they agreed to marry quickly, with Dr. Miller giving Naomi away and Jacob serving as Beau's best man. The ceremony was small but joyful, held in the town church with most of Rawhide in attendance. "Never thought I'd see the day," Tom Higgins commented at the reception, clapping Beau on the shoulder. "Remember when you first rode into town, didn't say more than 2 words together." Beau smiled, watching as Naomi chatted with the sheriff's wife across the room, Jacob never far from her side. "Things change, people change," Tom corrected, "and thank God for that." Sheriff Morgan offered Beau a position as deputy, impressed by his tracking skills and cool head during the Hendricks pursuit. After consulting with Naomi, Beau accepted, though he continued to assist at the clinic when needed. They moved into a small house near the center of town, 2 bedrooms, a cozy kitchen, and a front porch where Beau often sat in the evenings, watching the life of Rawhide flow around him. Jacob enrolled in the town school, his initial shyness gradually giving way to a cautious enthusiasm for learning and new friendships. The nightmares didn't disappear completely for either Beau or Jacob. On bad nights, they sometimes met in the kitchen, sharing warm milk and quiet conversation until the shadows receded. Naomi would join them sometimes, her presence a comfort to both. "Do you think they ever go away completely?" Jacob asked one such night, 6 months after coming to live with them. "The bad memories," Beau considered the question carefully. "I don't think they disappear," he said finally, "but they change, become less sharp, less powerful, and we build new memories alongside them, good ones that help balance the scales." Jacob nodded thoughtfully, stirring his milk. "I still miss my pa, but I'm glad I'm here with you and Miss Naomi." "We're glad too," Beau assured him, ruffling the boy's hair, "more than you know." As winter gave way to spring and spring bloomed into summer, life settled into new patterns. Rawhide continued to grow, with the promised railroad finally breaking ground east of town. Miller's practice expanded, with Naomi taking on more responsibilities and earning a reputation as a skilled healer in her own right. One evening in late August, as they sat on their porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, Naomi took Beau's hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "I've suspected for a few weeks," she said, her eyes shining with joy and trepidation. Miller confirmed it today. "We're going to have a baby." Beau stared at her, wonder and fear warring within him. "A baby," he repeated, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. Are you happy about it?" "Very," she assured him, "but I want to know how you feel." He looked down at his hand on her still flat stomach, trying to imagine the tiny life growing beneath. "I never thought I'd be a father," he admitted. "After the war, I couldn't see that kind of future for myself. And now?" She asked, the question an echo of one she'd asked him on another important night. Beau smiled, drawing her closer. "Now I can't imagine any other future. I want this, you, Jacob, our baby, all of it." They told Jacob the next day. The boy's face lit up with excitement. "Will it be a brother or a sister?" he demanded. "We won't know until the baby arrives," Naomi explained. "Either way, you'll be a big brother, an important job." Jacob nodded solemnly. "I'll take care of them, teach them stuff." "I know you will," Beau said, his throat tight with emotion. The family he'd never imagined having was growing before his eyes. As autumn painted the surrounding hills in golds and reds, Beau found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. From the battlefields of Gettysburg to the quiet streets of Rawhide, from a solitary drifter to a husband, father, and respected member of the community. He still carried the scars of war, the missing arm, the occasional nightmare, the memories that would never fully fade. But alongside them now were other things. Naomi's smile in the morning light, Jacob's proud face when he mastered a difficult lesson, the flutter of his unborn child beneath his palm, the satisfaction of a job well done, whether tracking outlaws or helping set a broken bone. One crisp October evening, as they walked home from a town gathering, Jacob ran ahead, chasing the last fireflies of the season. Naomi, her pregnancy beginning to show beneath her shawl, leaned against Beau's side. "Happy?" she asked simply. Beau looked down at her upturned face, at the woman who had seen in him possibilities he'd forgotten existed. "Whole," he corrected gently. "You were right, I already was. I just forgot for a while." She smiled, standing on tiptoe to kiss him as the stars appeared overhead and the distant sounds of piano music drifted from the saloon. Around them, Rawhide settled into evening, a town that had become home, a place of second chances and new beginnings. "I love you, Beau Daniels," Naomi whispered against his lips. "Every single piece of you." "And I love you," he replied, his arm tightening around her. "Every day a little more than the day before." They walked on toward home, toward Jacob who waited impatiently at their gate, toward the future they were building together, not perfect, not without challenges, but whole in all the ways that truly mattered. Winter came early that year, blanketing Rawhide in snow by mid-November. The town settled into its cold weather rhythms, shorter days, longer evenings by the fire, the community drawing closer together as the outside world became temporarily more distant. Beau found an unexpected peace in the quieter pace. As deputy, his duties shifted from chasing outlaws to helping neighbors dig out after storms, checking on elderly residents, and mediating the occasional dispute fueled by cabin fever. At home, he worked on projects for the baby's arrival: a cradle carved from pine, a rocking chair for Naomi, small toys whittled during evening hours. Jacob thrived in their growing family, his nightmares becoming rarer as months passed. He excelled at school, particularly in mathematics and reading, and had developed a close friendship with the blacksmith's son. On weekends, he shadowed Beau on his rounds, proud to be seen with the town's deputy. "You're good with him," Sheriff Morgan commented one afternoon as they watched Jacob help the livery boy feed the horses. "Natural father, seems like." Beau shook his head, still surprised sometimes by how his life had transformed. "Just trying my best. He makes it easy, good boy at heart." "Planning to make it official?" Morgan asked. "Adoption papers, I mean. Judge Wilson will be through in spring." The question caught Beau off guard, though he'd been thinking about it privately. "Haven't discussed it with Naomi yet, but yes, I'd like that. For Jacob to have our name, to know he's ours permanently." "Boy already knows," Morgan observed shrewdly, "but papers make it real to the world, something to consider." That evening, Beau broached the subject with Naomi as they sat by the fire, her mending in her lap, his whittling tools in his hand. "I've been thinking about it too," she admitted, her hands resting on her rounded belly. "Jacob deserves the security of knowing he belongs somewhere, legally as well as emotionally." "Do you think he'd want it?" Beau asked, setting aside the half-finished wooden horse he was making. "To be a Daniels officially?" Naomi smiled, her eyes soft in the firelight. "Why don't we ask him?" Jacob's response the next morning left no room for doubt. His eyes widened, then filled with tears that he hastily wiped away. "You mean it? You want me to stay forever, to be your son for real?" "We already think of you as our son," Beau assured him, his own voice rough with emotion. "This would just make it official on paper." Jacob threw his arms around both of them, his small body trembling with joy and relief. "Yes," he whispered, "please." As winter deepened, so did the bonds between them. Naomi's pregnancy progressed well, her body growing rounder as the baby developed. Dr. Miller checked on her regularly, pronouncing both mother and child healthy despite the harsh weather. "You'll have a spring baby," he predicted during a January visit. "Strong heartbeat, good position, everything looks perfect." Beau felt a profound gratitude that sometimes overwhelmed him completely for Miller's care, for the safety of their home, for the second chance at life he'd never expected to receive. He found himself writing again in the evenings, no longer just recording nightmares but capturing memories he wanted to preserve. Jacob's expression when he received his first fishing rod at Christmas, Naomi singing softly as she prepared dinner, the way the snow transformed Rawhide into something magical and new. February brought a week of brutal storms that isolated the town completely. Food supplies dwindled, and concerns grew about those living in outlying areas. When a brief break in the weather came, Sheriff Morgan organized a relief party to check on the most vulnerable homesteads. "You should stay with Naomi," Morgan told Beau as they loaded supplies onto sleds. "She's getting close to her time." Beau glanced toward his home, where smoke curled reassuringly from the chimney. Miller says we've got at least 6 weeks yet. And the Petersons' place is the furthest out. They've got 4 young children. I know that route better than anyone. Morgan couldn't argue with the logic, though he looked troubled. Be quick about it. Weather like this turns faster than a cornered rattler. The journey to the Petersons' homestead was arduous. 5 hours of fighting through snowdrifts and navigating landmarks rendered unfamiliar by winter's transformation. When they arrived, they found the family surviving but in dire need of the flour, coffee, and medicines they'd brought. "Angels, that's what you are," Martha Peterson declared, tears freezing on her cheeks as she embraced each member of the relief party. "We were down to our last cup of flour and Jimmy's cough was getting worse." They stayed long enough to repair a section of roof damaged in the storms and to ensure the family's woodpile would last until the thaw. By the time they started back, afternoon was fading toward evening and dark clouds were building again on the horizon. "We need to hurry," Beau urged, eyeing the gathering storm with concern. "That's coming in fast." They had covered perhaps half the distance to Rawhide when the storm hit a howling wall of wind and snow that reduced visibility to arm's length. The temperature plummeted and the horses struggled against the gale. "Need to find shelter," Morgan shouted over the wind. "Can't make town in this," Beau's mind raced, calculating their position. "Hamilton's old trapping cabin should be half a mile east. We can wait it out there." It took nearly an hour to cover that half mile, the men taking turns breaking trail for the exhausted horses. When the dim outline of the cabin finally appeared through the swirling snow, Beau felt a rush of relief that was short-lived. The structure was partially collapsed, its roof caved in on one side. Better than nothing, Morgan decided, surveying the damage. At least the stone fireplace is intact. They secured the horses in what remained of a lean-to and crowded into the cabin's more stable section. With frozen fingers, they managed to start a fire using the dry wood stacked against the interior wall, a godsend left by the cabin's previous occupants. As feeling returned to his extremities, Beau found himself increasingly anxious about Naomi and Jacob. "They'll be worried," he told Morgan, who was melting snow for coffee. "Nothing to be done about it now," the sheriff replied practically. "Naomi's a sensible woman. She'll know you found shelter." "Jacob still has nightmares sometimes," Beau said, more to himself than the others, about being left alone. One of the other men, a rancher named Ellis, passed him a tin cup of hot coffee. "Boy's not alone, though. He's got your wife. And this storm will blow itself out by morning. We'll be home before noon." Ellis was partially right. The storm did abate by dawn, leaving behind a transformed landscape of massive drifts and ice-coated trees. But their return to Rawhide took far longer than expected, as they had to literally dig a path for the horses through sections where snow had piled higher than a man's head. It was late afternoon when they finally reached the outskirts of town. Beau's anxiety had been growing with each passing hour, a nameless dread that intensified when he saw a crowd gathered outside his home. "Something's wrong," he muttered, urging his tired horse to a faster pace. As they drew closer, Beau recognized Dr. Miller's buggy outside his door. He practically fell from the saddle, pushing through concerned neighbors to reach his own porch. "Beau," Tom Higgins intercepted him at the door, his expression grave. "Thank God you're back. It's Naomi. The baby's coming early. Miller's been here since midnight." Cold fear gripped Beau's heart. "Is she? She's fighting," Tom assured him. "Strong woman, your wife, but it's been a hard labor. The storm kept Miller from bringing his usual assistant." Beau pushed past him into the house that suddenly felt strange and ominous. From the bedroom came sounds that turned his blood to ice. Naomi's labored breathing, punctuated by cries of pain that she seemed to be trying to suppress. Jacob sat on the stairs, his face pale and frightened. When he saw Beau, he launched himself forward, clinging to him with desperate strength. "Pa," he sobbed, using the title for the first time. "I was so scared. Miss Naomi started hurting and I ran for Dr. Miller in the storm and he said the baby's coming too soon and you went for Miller in that storm." Beau held the boy at arm's length, taking in his exhausted face. "That was incredibly brave, Jacob." "Had to," Jacob said simply. "She needed help." Beau hugged him fiercely, then gently set him aside. "I need to see her now. You've done everything right, son. Everything. In the bedroom, Miller looked up with obvious relief as Beau entered. "About time," he said gruffly, though there was no real reproach in his tone. "Your wife's been asking for you." Naomi lay on their bed, her face flushed with effort and pain, her hair dampened with sweat. When she saw Beau, she reached for him with trembling hands. "You came back," she whispered. "Always," he promised, kneeling beside her and taking her hand. "I'm sorry I wasn't here when it started," she shook her head weakly. "Not your fault, Storm. Baby decided not to wait." Miller moved to the foot of the bed, checking beneath the sheet that covered Naomi's lower half. "Getting close now," he announced. "Next contraction, I want you to push with everything you've got, Naomi." What followed was the most harrowing hour of Beau's life, worse than Gettysburg, worse than the amputation that followed, worse than all the dark nights of his soul combined. Naomi's strength seemed to ebb with each contraction. Her hand in his grew progressively weaker, her cries fainter. "Something's wrong," Beau said to Miller, his voice tight with fear. "She's fading." The doctor's face was grim as he worked. Baby's positioned awkwardly. "She's losing blood, but if I can just," he broke off, concentrating intensely on his task. "Beau," Naomi murmured, her eyes finding his with effort. "If I don't," he interrupted fiercely. "Don't say it. You're going to be fine, both of you." She managed a small smile. "Always the protector. Love that about you." Her eyes drifted closed, then snapped open again with new determination. "Tell me a story, distract me." So Beau talked, his voice steady despite the fear threatening to choke him. He told her about the relief mission, about the Petersons' gratitude, about the beauty of the sunrise over the snow-covered plains. He told her about his plans for the garden in spring, about how Jacob had called him Pa for the first time. He did. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes. "That's wonderful. We're going to be a family," Beau insisted. "All four of us. You just need to hold on a little longer." A powerful contraction gripped her then, and Miller called for one final push. Naomi gathered her remaining strength, crushing Beau's hand in hers, her face contorted with the supreme effort, and then a new sound. Thin, indignant, miraculous, the cry of a baby taking its first breath. "It's a boy," Miller announced, his voice thick with emotion and relief. "Small but strong." He placed the tiny, red-faced infant on Naomi's chest. She looked down at their son with wonder, her exhausted face transformed by joy. "Benjamin," she whispered, "after your father." Beau couldn't speak past the knot in his throat. He reached out with trembling fingers to touch his son's delicate head, overwhelmed by the perfect miniature features, the impossibly small hands, the fierce grip on life evident in every angry wail. Miller was still working, his face creased with concentration. "Still bleeding more than I'd like," he muttered. "Need to get that under control." The next hours passed in a blur as Miller fought to stabilize Naomi. The baby was bundled and placed in Beau's arm, his small weight a reminder of life's fragility and strength. Jacob was allowed in briefly to meet his new brother, his solemn face splitting into a grin at the sight of the infant's scrunched features. By midnight, Miller finally pronounced the crisis past. "She'll need complete rest for at least 2 weeks," he instructed Beau. "No getting up except for absolute necessities. The baby seems healthy despite arriving early, but keep him warm and feed him frequently." When they were finally alone, Naomi dozing, the baby asleep in a basket beside the bed, Jacob curled up on a pallet in the corner, Beau allowed himself to absorb the full impact of how close he'd come to losing everything. He sat in the chair beside the bed, watching Naomi's chest rise and fall with each precious breath, and silently thanked whatever force in the universe had granted them this reprieve. "You're thinking too loudly," Naomi murmured, her eyes opening to slits. "I can hear you worrying from here." "I almost lost you," he said, his voice cracking. "Both of you." She reached for his hand, her grip weak but determined. "But you didn't. We're still here. When I was stuck in that storm, I kept thinking about what you said to me the night we got together. About being whole already, just forgetting, and I realized something." "What's that?" she asked softly. "Being whole isn't about having all the pieces in perfect condition. It's about being complete in the ways that matter." He looked down at their joined hands. "Today, watching you fight to bring our son into the world, I understood what true wholeness is. It's this you, me, Jacob Benjamin. It's family, it's love." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered. "That's exactly what it is." Benjamin's birth marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. As winter gradually released its grip and spring arrived in a riot of wildflowers and birdsong, the family settled into new rhythms. Judge Wilson's circuit brought him to Rawhide in April, and Jacob officially became Jacob Daniels in a brief but emotional courthouse ceremony. The entire town seemed to celebrate with them a feast at the hotel, gifts for both the new baby and the newly adopted son, a sense of community that wrapped around them like a protective embrace. Beau returned to his duties as deputy, though he arranged his schedule to be home more. Naomi recovered her strength gradually, and by summer was well enough to resume limited duties at the clinic, often with Benjamin sleeping peacefully in a basket nearby. One evening in late June, as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, the family gathered on their porch. Jacob practiced reading aloud from a new book, Benjamin dozed in Naomi's arms, and Beau sat on the steps, watching fireflies begin their nightly dance over the yard. "I've been thinking," Naomi said during a pause in Jacob's reading, "about expanding the clinic's services." Beau turned to look at her, noting the familiar spark of purpose in her eyes. "What kind of expansion? There are so many children in the outlying areas who never see a doctor unless they're desperately ill," she explained. "I'd like to establish a regular circuit monthly visits to the more remote homesteads to check on children's health, provide basic treatments, educate parents." "That's a lot of territory to cover," Beau observed. "Dangerous too in some areas," Naomi smiled. "I happen to know a very capable deputy who might be willing to provide an escort, and Jacob's old enough now to come along sometimes. It would be educational for him." Jacob looked up eagerly. "Could I really come? I could help carry supplies and stuff." Beau considered the idea. It was ambitious and not without risks, but the potential benefits were significant. "Miller's on board with this." "It was partly his idea," Naomi admitted. "He's getting older, finds the long rides harder on his back, but he agrees the need is there." Looking at his family, the woman who had helped him rediscover his purpose, the boy who had chosen them as his parents, the infant who represented their shared future, Beau felt a deep contentment that still sometimes surprised him. From the broken, isolated man he'd been 3 years ago to this moment of belonging and purpose, the journey seemed almost miraculous in retrospect. "I think it's a fine idea," he said finally. "We could start with the closest homesteads, see how it works before venturing further." Naomi's face lit up with pleasure. "I was hoping you'd say that. I've already started compiling a list of families with children under 5. Jacob closed his book, his expression thoughtful. "Is this like when you went to help the Petersons in the storm, helping people who can't get to town?" "Exactly like that," Beau confirmed. "Except we'll be going before there's an emergency, trying to prevent problems before they happen." "I want to be a doctor someday," Jacob announced suddenly. "Like Dr. Miller and Miss Naomi, or maybe a deputy like you, Pa. I haven't decided yet." Beau exchanged a smile with Naomi over the boy's head. "You've got plenty of time to figure it out, son, and whatever you choose, we'll be proud." As darkness settled fully over Rawhide, they moved inside. Benjamin was settled in his cradle, Jacob was tucked into bed with a final chapter from his book, and Beau and Naomi found themselves alone in the kitchen. "Happy?" she asked, echoing the question she'd asked months earlier. Beau pulled her into his arms, breathing in the lavender scent of her hair. "More than I ever thought possible. You gave me back my life, Naomi. Showed me I was whole when I thought I was broken beyond repair." "We gave each other life," she corrected gently, raising her face for his kiss. "That's what love does. It reminds us who we really are, beneath all the scars and fears." As they stood together in the warm kitchen of the home they'd built, Beau Daniels reflected on the long, winding path that had brought him to this moment of perfect contentment. The war, the wandering years, the isolation, the pain, all of it had led him here, to Naomi, to Jacob, to Benjamin, to a community where he belonged. He thought of all the men who hadn't made it home from Gettysburg, all the lost souls still wandering, seeking the peace he'd found. For the first time, he felt not guilt for surviving but gratitude and a renewed determination to make his life worthy of the second chance he'd been given. "I love you," he whispered against Naomi's lips. "Every day, a little more than the day before." "And I love you," she replied, the words a promise, a benediction, a certainty as enduring as the Wyoming mountains rising beyond their window. "Every piece of you, always."